Red dust swirled around the mining equipment as another day began on Haven's Rest. The small colony sat like a metal island in the middle of the asteroid belt, where 300 people had made their home among the rocks and ice. Children's voices echoed through the corridors as they ran to school, their feet making soft sounds on the metal floors. Maria Santos smiled as she watched her students settle into their seats. The classroom had big windows that showed the endless space outside, filled with slowly spinning rocks that caught the distant sunlight. Some of the children pressed their faces against the glass, pointing at the mining ships that moved like tiny ants between the asteroids. "Today we're going to learn about the different types of rocks we find out here," Maria said, holding up a chunk of iron ore. 8-year-old Lucy Chen raised her hand immediately. "Miss Santos, do you think there are aliens living on some of these rocks?" Lucy asked, her eyes bright with curiosity. Before Maria could answer, the lights in the classroom flickered. A deep rumble shook the entire colony, making the children look around with worried faces. Through the windows, they could see a bright flash of light in the distance, followed by a trail of smoke and fire. The emergency alarm began to sound, its sharp beeps filling the air. Maria quickly moved to the intercom button on her desk. "All students, please move away from the windows and sit on the floor," she said in her calmest voice, even though her heart was beating fast. In the colony's control room, Administrator David Park stared at the screens in front of him. The radar showed a large object that had crashed into the outer section of the colony, near the storage areas. The shape on the screen was wrong somehow, not like any human ship he had ever seen. "Get me a damage report," David said to his team. "And send security to check what crashed into us." Dr. Ellen Rodriguez was already putting on her emergency suit when the call came through. As the colony's doctor and scientist, she was always the first to respond when something went wrong. But as she made her way toward the crash site, she had a strange feeling in her stomach. The object on the radar had looked too smooth, too curved to be human technology. The security team reached the crash site first. What they found made them step back in surprise. The ship was beautiful in a deadly way, with smooth curves and a dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly with purple light. "I've never seen anything like it," whispered Security Chief Roberts into his radio. "It's definitely not one of ours." When Dr. Rodriguez arrived, she could smell something burning in the air. The ship had torn through the outer wall of the storage area, leaving twisted metal and broken pipes behind. But the ship itself looked almost alive, like it had grown rather than been built. "Be careful," she told the security team. "We don't know what's inside." They approached the ship slowly. A crack had opened in its side, revealing a dark interior. Roberts shined his flashlight into the opening, and everyone held their breath. A small sound came from inside the ship, not mechanical, but something like a hurt animal might make. Dr. Rodriguez felt her fear change into concern. Whatever was inside, it sounded like it was in pain. "I'm going in," she said, ignoring Robert's protests. "If something's hurt, it needs help." The inside of the ship was warm and humid, with surfaces that felt more like bone than metal. Strange lights glowed softly along the walls, giving everything a purple tint. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, Dr. Rodriguez saw something that made her gasp. In the far corner of the ship, curled up like a frightened cat, was a creature unlike anything she had ever seen. It was small, about the size of a house cat, with scales that shifted between deep purple and silver as it breathed. Its body was long and graceful, with 4 legs ending in clawed feet. 2 wings lay folded against its back, one of them clearly torn and bleeding. The creature looked up at her with large, intelligent eyes that seemed almost human in their expression. Instead of attacking or hissing, it made a soft chirping sound and tried to back further into the corner. Dr. Rodriguez could see that one of its legs was bent at a wrong angle, and there were cuts on its side that oozed a silvery fluid. "It's okay," she whispered, the way she might talk to a scared child. "I want to help you." The creature tilted its head at the sound of her voice, its eyes never leaving her face. Slowly, carefully, Dr. Rodriguez reached into her medical bag and pulled out a scanner. When she moved it toward the creature, it flinched but didn't try to bite or scratch her. The scanner's readings made her eyes widen. The creature's body temperature was higher than human normal, and its heart was beating very fast. But most importantly, the scanner showed that this was definitely a young creature, possibly not even fully grown. "Roberts," she called softly into her radio. "I need you to prepare the medical bay and get Administrator Park down here. He needs to see this." When David Park arrived at the crash site, he expected to find wreckage and maybe some alien technology they could study. He did not expect to find Dr. Rodriguez sitting quietly near a small, injured dragon-like creature that watched him with curious eyes. "What is it?" David asked, his voice tight with worry. "I think it's a juvenile of whatever species built this ship," Dr. Rodriguez said. "And it's badly hurt. Look at this wing membrane. It's torn completely through. This little one isn't going anywhere for a while." David stared at the creature. In all the reports from the outer colonies, the dragon-like aliens had been described as fierce warriors, larger than humans and completely hostile. This small injured thing looked nothing like those descriptions. "We should contain it," David said. "It could be dangerous." "David, look at it," Dr. Rodriguez said firmly. "Does this look dangerous to you? It's hurt, scared, and probably lost. Whatever species this one is just a baby." The creature made another soft sound and tried to move closer to the warmth of the ship's wall. The movement made it whimper with pain, and Dr. Rodriguez felt her heart break a little. "I'm taking it to the medical bay," she announced. "If we're going to learn anything about these aliens, we need to start by showing that we can be trusted." As they carefully moved the injured creature, none of them noticed the small group of children who had snuck away from their classroom to see what the excitement was about. Hidden behind some storage containers, Lucy Chen and her friends watched with wide eyes as the adults carried the dragon-like being toward the medical center. "It looks like the dragons in my storybooks," Lucy whispered to her friend Ben Foster. "Do you think it's friendly?" Ben whispered back. Lucy thought about the way the creature had looked at Dr. Rodriguez, not with anger or hunger, but with what looked like hope. "I think it just wants someone to take care of it," she said. Neither of the children could have guessed that this moment would change everything for their small colony, and maybe even for the future of two different species among the stars. 3 weeks had passed since the crash, and the medical bay had become the most interesting place in the colony. The small dragon creature that Dr. Rodriguez had named Ember was healing faster than anyone expected. The torn wing membrane was already showing signs of new growth, and the broken leg was mending well inside its soft cast. Ember had grown too, now about the size of a medium dog, though still clearly young. Its scales had brightened as it recovered, shifting from purple to silver to sometimes a warm gold color when the lights hit them just right. Most remarkable of all, the creature seemed to understand that it was being helped. Dr. Rodriguez spent hours each day with Ember, checking its wounds and making sure it ate the mixture of proteins and minerals she had created for its diet. At first, Ember had been afraid to eat anything, but now it would take food directly from her hand, making small happy sounds when she brought its favorite treats. "The intelligence tests are amazing," Dr. Rodriguez told Administrator Park during their daily meeting. "It can solve simple puzzles faster than most animals, and it's learning to use tools. Watch this." She opened a container with a treat inside, but the lid was held down by a simple latch. Ember looked at the container for a moment, then used one claw to flip the latch open and retrieve the food. It had learned to do this after seeing Dr. Rodriguez do it only 3 times. "That's impressive," David admitted, "but we still don't know anything about its species' intentions. The outer colonies report Draknari ships massing near the edge of human space." Dr. Rodriguez frowned. The Draknari, that was what the military called the dragon-like aliens after several hostile encounters in recent months. Every contact had ended in fighting, with the aliens showing no interest in communication or peace. "This little one isn't hostile," she said. "Maybe the adults are different from the young ones." David was about to respond when an alarm chimed softly. Someone was approaching the medical bay without authorization. They looked at the security screen and saw a small figure creeping down the corridor. "Lucy Chen," Dr. Rodriguez sighed. "That's the 3rd time this week." 8-year-old Lucy had been fascinated by Ember since the day of the crash. She had asked her parents and teachers dozens of questions about the creature, and had even drawn pictures of dragons in her notebook. Despite repeated warnings to stay away from the medical bay, she kept finding excuses to visit. This time, Lucy had waited until lunch period, when most of the adults were busy. She slipped into the medical bay just as Dr. Rodriguez and Administrator Park were leaving to get coffee. The room was quiet except for the soft humming of medical equipment, Ember was lying on a special bed that Dr. Rodriguez had built, with its injured wings spread out to heal properly. When Lucy entered, the creature's head turned toward her immediately. Instead of being scared, Lucy felt excited. She had always loved animals, and this was the most amazing animal she had ever seen. "Hello," she whispered, moving slowly closer. "I'm Lucy. Are you feeling better?" Ember's large eyes followed her movement. The creature made a soft, questioning sound, almost like it was trying to copy the tone of her voice. Lucy stopped a few feet away from the bed. She had been taught never to approach strange animals too quickly, but something about Ember made her feel safe. The dragon's eyes were gentle, and it hadn't made any aggressive moves. "You're beautiful," Lucy said softly. "Your scales look like they have rainbows in them." Ember tilted its head, and Lucy could have sworn it looked pleased by the compliment. Slowly, carefully, the creature extended one claw toward her. Lucy looked at the claw. It was sharp, but Ember was holding it gently, palm up, like it was asking for something. Lucy remembered how her grandmother's cat would ask for pets by reaching out its paw. Taking a deep breath, she reached out and gently touched Ember's claw with her fingertip. The moment their skin touched, something amazing happened. Ember made a sound unlike any it had made before, a warm, musical trill that sounded almost like purring. The creature's scales brightened to a beautiful golden color, and Lucy felt a strange tingling sensation in her finger. "Wow," she breathed. "You're warm. And you're not scary at all, are you?" From the hallway came the sound of returning footsteps. Dr. Rodriguez's voice echoed off the walls as she talked with Administrator Park. Lucy knew she should leave before she got in trouble, but Ember made another soft sound as if asking her to stay. "I have to go," Lucy whispered, "but I'll try to visit again soon, okay?" Ember seemed to understand. It carefully withdrew its claw and settled back onto its bed, but its eyes followed Lucy as she quietly slipped out of the medical bay. Dr. Rodriguez returned to find Ember in an unusually good mood. The creature's scales were brighter than usual, and it seemed more alert and energetic. She ran her usual checks, but everything appeared normal. Over the next few days, more children began finding ways to visit the medical bay. Ben Foster claimed he had scraped his knee and needed a bandage. 10-year-old Amy Wilson said she felt sick and needed to see the doctor. 12-year-old Sam Torres brought his younger sister, saying she had a cough. None of them were really sick or injured, and Dr. Rodriguez quickly realized what was happening. Word about Ember had spread among the children, and they were all curious about the dragon creature. At first, she planned to put a stop to these visits. But she noticed something interesting. Ember responded differently to children than it did to adults. With adults, the creature was polite but reserved. With children, it became playful and engaged. When Lucy made her official return visit, after Dr. Rodriguez decided to allow supervised interactions, Ember immediately perked up. The creature had learned to recognize the sound of children's footsteps in the hallway and would lift its head expectantly whenever young voices approached. "Hello, friend," Lucy said, using the word Dr. Rodriguez had been teaching Ember. To everyone's amazement, Ember tried to repeat the word. Its vocal cords weren't designed for human speech, but it managed something that sounded like, "Friend, friend." Dr. Rodriguez felt chills run down her spine. She had suspected Ember was intelligent, but this was proof that the creature could learn human language. Over the following week, more children visited under careful supervision. Each time, Ember showed the same gentle behavior. It never tried to bite or scratch, never showed aggression. Instead, it seemed genuinely happy to have young visitors. The breakthrough came when 8-year-old Tim Brady tripped while approaching Ember's bed. The boy fell hard, scraping his knee on the metal floor. He started to cry, both from pain and embarrassment. Ember's reaction was immediate and unexpected. The creature carefully got up from its bed, despite its injuries, and positioned itself between Tim and the door. It made urgent, concerned sounds while looking back and forth between the crying child and Dr. Rodriguez, as if trying to tell the adult that help was needed. When Dr. Rodriguez knelt down to clean Tim's scrape, Ember watched carefully. The creature seemed to understand that she was helping the child, and it relaxed only when Tim stopped crying and smiled again. "It's protecting him," Dr. Rodriguez whispered in amazement. Administrator Park, who had been watching through the security cameras, arrived at the medical bay with a troubled expression. "Ellen," he said quietly, "we need to talk. I just received word that Draknari ships have been spotted heading toward this system. They'll be here within the month." Dr. Rodriguez looked at Ember, who was gently nuzzling Tim's uninjured hand while the boy giggled with delight. "They're coming for Ember, aren't they?" she asked. "Most likely," David nodded. "And I don't think they're coming to negotiate." As if sensing the adult's concern, Ember looked up at them with its intelligent eyes. The creature made a soft questioning sound as if asking what was wrong. Lucy, who had been listening to the conversation, stepped closer to Ember's bed. "Don't worry," she said firmly. "We won't let anyone hurt you. You're our friend now." Ember seemed to understand the tone, if not all the words. The creature's scales shifted to a warm golden color, and it made its musical purring sound. Dr. Rodriguez realized that everything was about to change for their small colony. The approaching Draknari ships represented either the greatest diplomatic opportunity in human history or the beginning of a war that could destroy them all. But looking at the bond forming between Ember and the children, she began to hope for something that had seemed impossible just weeks before. Maybe two species could learn to understand each other after all. 2 months after the crash, Ember had become as much a part of daily life at Haven's Rest as the morning shift change or the evening meal bell. The young dragon now stood as tall as a large dog, with wings that could spread wider than a person's arms. Its scales had settled into a beautiful pattern of deep blue and silver, with gold highlights that appeared when it was happy or excited. The children had officially adopted Ember as their protector, though the adults weren't sure who was really protecting whom. Every morning, a small group would visit the medical bay before school, and Ember would greet each child individually, making soft trilling sounds that had become its version of saying hello. Maria Santos had even started bringing her entire class to visit Ember twice a week. The dragon had become an unexpected teaching tool, helping the children learn about biology, behavior, and even basic engineering, as Dr. Rodriguez explained how she had designed Ember's healing equipment. "Look how Ember's wing membranes are structured," Dr. Rodriguez explained to the fascinated students. "They're actually more complex than bird wings, with multiple layers of muscle and blood vessels." Ember seemed to enjoy these lessons too, carefully extending its wing so the children could see the intricate patterns of veins beneath the translucent membrane. When 12-year-old Alex Murphy asked if it hurt to spread its wings, Ember gently folded them again and made a sound that everyone had learned meant no or safe. The dragon's vocabulary had grown remarkably. It could now say simple words like friend, food, good, and each child's name in its own unique way. More impressively, it had learned to understand much more complex instructions and seemed to grasp the meaning behind human emotions. When 6-year-old Sophie Lee had cried after learning that her grandmother was sick back on Earth, Ember had somehow sensed her distress from across the colony. The dragon had made urgent sounds until Dr. Rodriguez let it out of the medical bay, and it had gone straight to the school to find Sophie, where it spent the afternoon gently nuzzling her until she felt better. But it was during the environmental crisis that Ember truly proved what it had become. The trouble started on a routine Tuesday morning. The colony's atmospheric processors, which cleaned and recycled the air in all the habitat domes, began showing warning signs. A leak in the primary system was allowing dangerous gases to build up in Sector C, right next to the school area. Engineer Chen was in the control room when the first alarm sounded. "We've got a problem," he announced over the intercom. "Toxic gas leak in Sector C. All residents need to evacuate to Sectors A and B immediately." The evacuation should have been simple. The children were trained for emergencies and the teachers knew exactly how to move them to safety. But in the confusion of alarms and rushing adults, 10-year-old Ben Foster became separated from his class. Ben had been in the bathroom when the alarm started. By the time he came out, the hallways were filled with people moving quickly toward the safe zones. The frightened boy tried to follow the crowd, but took a wrong turn and ended up in a maintenance corridor that led deeper into Sector C, where the toxic gases were strongest. Meanwhile, Ember had reacted to the emergency in a way that surprised everyone. The moment the alarm sounded, the dragon had begun making urgent warning calls and pacing around the medical bay. Dr. Rodriguez tried to calm it down, but Ember became increasingly agitated. Something's wrong, Ember said, using words it had learned to express distress. Bad smell. Dr. Rodriguez checked her instruments, but the air in the medical bay was still clean. She was about to sedate Ember to keep it calm when the dragon did something it had never done before. It pushed past her and headed for the exit. Ember, no, Dr. Rodriguez called, but the dragon was already in the hallway. Instead of fleeing toward the safe zones like every other living thing in the colony, Ember moved toward Sector C. Its enhanced senses could detect the toxic gases long before human instruments registered them, and more importantly, it could smell something else, a frightened human child in danger. Ben Foster had realized he was lost when the hallways became empty and quiet, except for the sound of alarms. The air tasted strange, making him cough, and he felt dizzy. He tried to retrace his steps, but the corridors all looked the same and his head was getting fuzzy. When he heard the sound of claws on metal flooring, Ben thought he was dreaming. But then Ember appeared around a corner, moving quickly but carefully through the dangerous area. The dragon's scales had turned a deep red color, a warning pattern that Dr. Rodriguez had never seen before. Ben, Ember said clearly, using the name it had learned weeks ago. Come, Danger. The boy was too dizzy to argue. When Ember lowered its body, Ben climbed onto the dragon's back without thinking. Ember's scales felt warm and reassuring, and the strange smell in the air didn't seem as strong when he was close to the dragon. Moving with surprising speed and grace, Ember carried Ben through the maze of corridors toward safety. The dragon seemed to know exactly where to go. Following scent trails and air currents that humans couldn't detect, they reached the safe zone just as the emergency teams were preparing to search for Ben, when his teacher, Maria Santos, saw the boy riding on Ember's back. She felt tears of relief fill her eyes. How did you find him? Dr. Rodriguez asked Ember as she checked both the boy and the dragon for signs of gas poisoning. Ember's scales shifted to a calmer blue color as it settled down next to Ben, who was being treated with oxygen. Smell scared, the dragon said simply. Help friend. The incident marked a turning point in how the adults viewed Ember. Administrator Park, who had remained cautious about the dragon's presence, publicly thanked the creature during the colony's evening assembly. Today, Ember showed us something important, David announced to the gathered residents. This being, who could have stayed safe, chose to risk its own life to save one of our children. That's not the action of a dangerous alien. That's the action of a true friend. The children cheered, and Ember's scales brightened to gold at the sound of their approval. But Dr. Rodriguez had made another discovery that worried her. While treating Ember after the rescue, she had run comprehensive scans and found that the dragon's physiology was changing. Its brain activity was increasing, its muscle mass was growing, and most significantly, its protective instincts were becoming stronger and more sophisticated. Ember was maturing, but not in the way she expected. Instead of becoming more aggressive like the adult Draknari described in military reports, it was becoming more nurturing, more intelligent, and more bonded to the human children. That evening, as she watched Ember sleep peacefully in the middle of a circle of children who had been allowed to have a sleepover in the medical bay as a reward for the dragon's heroism, Dr. Rodriguez wondered what would happen when the adult Draknari arrived. Long-range sensors had detected the approaching fleet, still weeks away but definitely heading toward Haven's Rest. The military experts believed they were coming to retrieve their lost youngling and possibly to punish the humans who had corrupted it. But looking at Ember, surrounded by the children it had sworn to protect, Dr. Rodriguez began to wonder if the adult Draknari truly understood what they were coming to find. The being sleeping peacefully among human children bore little resemblance to the fierce warriors described in the reports. Lucy Chen stirred in her sleep and unconsciously moved closer to Ember's warm side. The dragon's wing shifted slightly, creating a more comfortable shelter for the girl. Whatever was coming, Dr. Rodriguez realized, Ember would not abandon its chosen family without a fight. And judging by the determination she had seen in the children's faces when they talked about protecting their dragon friend, the feeling was completely mutual. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just the fate of one small colony, but possibly the future relationship between two intelligent species among the stars. The warning came on a quiet morning when most of the children were in the school garden, teaching Ember about different earth plants. The dragon had become fascinated by growing things, gently touching leaves with its claws and making interested sounds when Maria Santos explained how photosynthesis worked. Communication specialist Lisa Park looked up from her console in the control room with a worried expression. The long-range scanners had picked up something that made her stomach drop. 7 large objects were moving through space toward their system, and their energy signatures matched the Draknari ships from previous hostile encounters. Administrator Park, she called out, her voice tight with concern. You need to see this. David Park hurried to the communication station and studied the readings. The ships were still 3 days away, but they were definitely heading straight for Haven's Rest. More troubling, intercepted signal fragments suggested they weren't coming for a peaceful reunion. Can you translate any of their communications? David asked. Lisa nodded grimly. Some of it. They keep using words that translate to retrieve, cleanse, and corrupted offspring. It doesn't sound good. In the garden, Ember suddenly lifted its head from the tomato plants it had been examining. The dragon's scales shifted to a worried gray color, and it made a low sound that the children had learned meant something was wrong. What is it, Ember? Asked 15-year-old Sarah Kim, who had become one of the dragon's favorite students because of her gentle way with scared animals. Ember looked toward the sky, even though they were inside the dome. Family comes, it said in its careful English. Old family. Angry family. The children exchanged glances. Over the months, they had learned that Ember could sense things long before the adult humans detected them. If the dragon said its family was coming, they believed it. Are you scared? Asked 9-year-old Danny Walsh. Ember considered the question seriously. Its scales shifted through several colors before settling on a determined blue. Not scared for me, it said slowly. Scared for little friends? Old family not understand little friends. That afternoon, Administrator Park called an emergency meeting. The entire colony gathered in the main assembly hall, including the children. Ember sat in the front row, surrounded by its human family, its scales a protective silver color. I won't lie to you, David began. We have Draknari ships approaching our system. Based on their communications, they're coming to take Ember back to their people. A murmur of concern rippled through the crowd. Many of the adults looked worried, but the children's reactions were different. Lucy Chen stood up, her 8-year-old voice clear and strong. Ember doesn't belong to them anymore, she announced. Ember belongs with us. We're family now. Other children nodded in agreement. Ben Foster, who owed his life to Ember's rescue during the gas leak, spoke up next. Families protect each other. That's what Ember taught us. Dr. Rodriguez had been studying Ember's development for months, and what she had discovered both amazed and worried her. The dragon's brain scans showed intelligence levels that rivaled human teenagers, and its emotional responses had become increasingly complex and nuanced. Ember, she said gently, when your people arrive, what do you think they'll want? The dragon was quiet for a long moment, its scales cycling through colors as it thought. They want me to be like them, it finally said. Strong like them. Fight like them. But I am not like them anymore. I am like little friends now. Engineer Chen raised his hand. What if we try to negotiate? Explain how Ember has changed. Show them that it's happy here. Lisa Park shook her head. I've been monitoring their communications. They're not coming to talk. They view Ember's time with us as contamination that needs to be corrected or eliminated. The word eliminated hung in the air like a cold wind. Ember's scales turned a protective red and it moved closer to the children. They will not harm little friends, Ember said firmly. I will not let them. Over the next 2 days, the colony prepared for the arrival of the Draknari fleet. The adults worked on defense systems and evacuation plans, while the children spent as much time as possible with Ember. They seemed to understand, in the way children do, that everything was about to change. Ember had grown to nearly adult size now, with a wingspan that could fill the corridor when fully extended. But despite its impressive physical development, it remained gentle with the children, careful never to accidentally hurt them with its claws or tail. The dragon had also become remarkably helpful around the colony. It could operate simple computer interfaces with its precise claws, helped move heavy equipment with its strength, and even assisted with repairs in areas too dangerous for humans. Its intelligence continued to develop at an amazing rate, and it had begun to understand complex human concepts like friendship, loyalty, and sacrifice. On the evening before the Draknari fleet was scheduled to arrive, The children held what they called a protection ceremony for Ember. They had made the dragon a collar from woven synthetic fibers, decorated with small symbols that represented each child in the colony. "This shows that you're part of our family," Lucy explained, as she carefully placed the collar around Ember's neck. "No matter what happens, you'll always be our dragon." Ember's scales brightened to the warm gold color that meant deep happiness. "Little friends are my family too," it said. "Always and always." That night, Administrator Park received the final communication from the approaching fleet. The message was brief and harsh. "Return the corrupted youngling immediately or face destruction. You have contaminated what belongs to us. This will not be forgiven." David looked at the message for a long time before calling Dr. Rodriguez to his office. "Ellen," he said quietly, "what do you think will happen if we refuse to give Ember up?" Dr. Rodriguez had been thinking about the same question. "I think we're about to find out if one young dragon's love for human children is stronger than thousands of years of Draknari military tradition." In the garden dome, Ember lay surrounded by sleeping children who had been allowed to camp out for the night. The dragon's wings were spread wide, creating a protective canopy over its human family. Its eyes remained open, watching the stars through the clear dome, waiting for the ships that would arrive with the morning. The dragon had made its choice long ago, but tomorrow, that choice would be tested in ways that none of them could imagine. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the space around the colony, Ember made a sound that was part song, part growl, and part promise. Whatever came with the morning, it would face it as what it had become, not just a dragon, but a guardian of human children, protector of the innocent, and bridge between two worlds that had never learned to understand each other. The future of two species would be decided by a young dragon who had learned to love, and the human children who had taught it how. The Draknari fleet arrived with the morning shift change, appearing in the space around Haven's Rest like dark thunderclouds blocking out the sun. 7 massive ships, each one larger than the entire colony, positioned themselves in a threatening formation. Their hulls were black as space itself, covered with the same glowing purple symbols that had decorated Ember's crashed vessel. In the colony's central plaza, Ember stood perfectly still, its head raised toward the dome ceiling as if it could see through the metal and plastic to the ships beyond. The dragon's scales had turned a deep, determined blue, and its wings were held slightly open in a posture that Dr. Rodriguez had learned meant it was ready to protect something important. The children had insisted on staying with Ember, despite their parents' fears. They formed a circle around their dragon friend, holding hands and looking up at the ships with a mixture of fear and defiance that amazed the adults, watching through security cameras. "We're not leaving Ember alone," 12-year-old Alex Murphy had announced when Administrator Park tried to evacuate them to the safe zones. "If something bad happens, we want to be together." The first communication from the fleet came as a harsh voice speaking in the Draknari language, translated by the colony's computers into words that made everyone's blood run cold. "Humans of the mining facility," the voice announced, "you have 1 hour to return our youngling to us. The creature you hold has been contaminated by exposure to your species and must be reclaimed for proper re-education. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of your facility." Administrator Park activated the colony's communication system, his voice steady despite his fear. "This is Haven's Rest Colony. The being you call your youngling has made its own choice to stay with us. We request the opportunity to discuss this situation peacefully." The response came immediately, filled with what sounded like contempt. "There is nothing to discuss. The youngling is property of the Draknari Empire. Its choices are irrelevant. You have 58 minutes remaining." In the plaza, Ember lifted its head and made a sound unlike any the humans had heard before. It was deep, resonant, and carried clearly through the colony's corridors. Dr. Rodriguez felt her skin prickle as she realized what she was hearing. Ember was communicating with its own species for the first time since the crash. The dragon's call continued for several minutes, rising and falling in complex patterns that seemed almost like music. When it finished, Ember looked down at the children surrounding it and spoke in English. "I told them I choose to stay," Ember said simply. "I told them little friends are my family now." The reply came from the ships above, and even without translation, everyone could hear the anger in the alien voices. But Ember's response surprised them all. Instead of cowering or trying to hide, the dragon moved to the center of the plaza and spread its wings wide. Lucy Chen understood first. "Ember's protecting us," she whispered to her friends. "Look at how it's standing." The dragon had positioned itself between the children and the dome ceiling, creating a living shield with its body. Its scales had turned a brilliant silver color, and its eyes held a determination that reminded Dr. Rodriguez of a parent protecting their young. 15 minutes before the deadline, the first Draknari entered the colony. The airlock cycled open with a hiss of escaping air, and Fleet Commander Korak stepped into Haven's Rest. He was everything the military reports had described and more. Nearly 8 feet tall, with scales like black armor and wings that scraped the corridor ceiling. His claws left scratches in the metal floor as he walked, and his eyes glowed with an inner fire that spoke of countless battles. Behind him came 2 other adult Draknari, equally impressive and intimidating. They moved through the colony's corridors like predators, dismissing the humans they passed as beneath notice. Their destination was clear: the central plaza where their lost youngling waited. When Korak entered the plaza and saw the scene before him, he stopped so suddenly that the dragons behind him nearly collided with his massive form. In the center of the open space, surrounded by small human children, stood a young Draknari that barely resembled the fierce warriors of his fleet. Ember had grown to nearly adult size, but everything else about it was wrong. Its posture was protective rather than aggressive. Its scales held colors of peace rather than war. And most shocking of all, it was allowing alien younglings to touch it without any sign of dominance or control. "What have they done to you?" Korak growled in the Draknari language, his voice carrying clearly through the plaza. Ember responded in a mixture of Draknari and English that stunned both species. "They have shown me what family means," it said. "They have taught me that strength comes from protecting, not conquering." The children, who had been silent since the adult dragons arrived, began to move. Instead of running away in fear, they stepped closer to Ember, forming a tighter circle around their friend. Lucy Chen, the smallest and youngest of the group, did something that made even Korak take a step back. She walked directly toward the massive alien commander and held out her hand. "Hello," she said in her clear, fearless voice. "I'm Lucy. Ember has told us about you. Would you like to meet our family?" Korak stared down at the tiny human who showed no fear of his claws, his fangs, or his size. In all his years of conquest and battle, he had never encountered a being so small and vulnerable that approached him without terror. The child's eyes held curiosity instead of fear, hope instead of hate. "Family." Korak repeated the word in heavily accented English, as if he had never heard it before. "Ember is part of our family now," Ben Foster explained, stepping up beside Lucy. "And families protect each other." Other children began to speak, each one sharing what Ember meant to them. They told stories of how the dragon had helped them with their studies, comforted them when they were scared, and risked its own life to save them from danger. As they spoke, Ember moved among them, gently touching each child with its wing or claw, demonstrating the bonds that had formed between them. Korak's 2 companions shifted restlessly, clearly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. One of them, a scarred female named Thara, spoke up in the Draknari language. "This is an abomination," she declared. "The youngling has been corrupted beyond recovery. We should destroy it and the vermin that contaminated it." But Korak was still staring at Lucy's outstretched hand. The human child had not moved, despite being surrounded by dragons that could kill her with a single swipe of their claws. Her trust was absolute, her courage undeniable. Ember had been listening to the adult dragon speak, and now it moved to stand directly in front of Korak. The young dragon was no longer the size of a house cat that had crashed into the colony months ago. It was nearly as large as the adults, with fully developed wings and claws that could match theirs in battle. "I am not corrupted," Ember said clearly, speaking in Draknari so all the dragons could understand. "I am evolved. I have learned what our people forgot long ago, that true strength comes from love, not fear." The confrontation in the plaza had reached a turning point. 2 philosophies, 2 ways of life, faced each other across a space no larger than a school playground. On one side stood the ancient ways of the Draknari Empire, conquest, dominance, and the belief that might makes right. On the other stood something new and unprecedented, a dragon who had learned to love, surrounded by human children who had taught it the meaning of family. What happened next would determine not just the fate of Haven's Rest, but the future relationship between two species among the stars. The standoff in the plaza stretched on for what felt like hours, though the chronometers showed only minutes passing. Fleet Commander Korak stood motionless, his burning eyes moving between Lucy's still extended hand and Ember's defiant stance. The other adult Draknari shifted impatiently, their claws scratching against the metal floor. The moment that changed everything came not from words or threats, but from an accident. 6-year-old Sophie Lee, who had been standing quietly with the other children, suddenly stumbled. Her small legs had gotten tired from standing so long, and she lost her balance, falling toward the sharp edge of a maintenance panel that jutted out from the plaza wall. 3 beings moved at once. Ember lunged forward with protective instinct. Korak's massive arm swept out with warrior reflexes, and both reached Sophie at the same moment. The adult dragon's clawed hand closed gently around the falling child, while Ember's wing curved over both of them, creating a protective shelter. For a heartbeat, the 3 species were connected. Human child, young dragon, and ancient warrior, all part of the same protective gesture. Sophie looked up at Korak with wide, grateful eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. "That would have hurt." Korak stared down at the child in his palm. She weighed almost nothing. Her bones felt as fragile as crystal, yet she showed no fear of his deadly claws. Instead, she patted his scaled finger with her tiny hand as if comforting him. "How do they do this?" Korak asked Ember in Draknari, his voice filled with wonder. "How do they face beings who could destroy them and show no fear?" "Because they know I will protect them," Ember replied. "And now they know you will too." The adult dragon carefully set Sophie back on her feet, his movements precise and gentle. The child smiled up at him, then returned to stand with her friends, completely trusting that the massive alien would not harm her. Thara, the scarred female dragon, could not understand what she was witnessing. "They are weak," she insisted. "This proves nothing except that their species is helpless." "No," said another voice. Korak's second companion, a younger male named Voss, had been watching the children with growing fascination. "Look at them more carefully. They face us without weapons, without armor, without any defense except their trust in our youngling. That is not weakness. That is the greatest courage I have ever seen." As if responding to his words, the children began to move closer to the adult dragons, not in fear or submission, but with the same fearless curiosity they had always shown toward Ember. Ben Foster approached Thera, while Alex Murphy moved toward Voss. Soon, each adult dragon found themselves surrounded by small humans who asked questions, offered their hands in greeting, and showed genuine interest in learning about their species. Thera tried to maintain her aggressive posture, but when 8-year-old Danny Walsh asked her about the beautiful patterns on her scales, she found herself explaining Draknari art and culture to an audience that listened with complete attention and obvious fascination. "They want to understand us," Voss said quietly to Korak. "When has any species ever wanted to understand us rather than simply surrender to us?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Rodriguez had been watching the interaction through security cameras, but now she entered the plaza with Administrator Park and several other adults. The humans moved carefully, showing respect for the massive dragons while still positioning themselves protectively near their children. "Because understanding leads to friendship," Dr. Rodriguez said, speaking in carefully pronounced Draknari. "And friendship is stronger than fear." Korak turned his attention to the human female who had cared for Ember during its recovery. "You learned our language," he observed. "Ember taught me," Dr. Rodriguez replied, "just as we taught Ember our language. Learning from each other makes both species stronger." The fleet commander looked around the plaza at a scene unlike anything in Draknari history. Human children were teaching dragon warriors simple games, while the dragons shared stories of distant worlds and stellar phenomena. Ember moved among all of them, translating when needed, facilitating understanding between species that had known only conflict. "This is not what we expected to find," Korak admitted. "What did you expect?" asked Maria Santos, who had just arrived with more children who had insisted on meeting the visiting dragons. "We expected to find our youngling imprisoned, tortured, or broken," Thara answered honestly. "We expected to find enemies who had stolen what belongs to us." Lucy Chen, who had been patiently waiting for her chance to speak again, stepped forward. "But that's silly," she said with 8-year-old logic. "You can't steal someone who wants to be somewhere. Ember chose to stay with us just like we choose to be friends with Ember." The simplicity of her statement hit the adult dragons like a physical blow. In all their philosophy of conquest and dominance, they had never considered that their youngling might simply choose a different path. Ember, sensing the crucial moment, spread its wings wide and spoke in both languages simultaneously. "I was lost when I came here," it said, "broken and afraid. These little friends did not capture me or change me. They loved me back to wholeness. They showed me that strength comes not from taking what you want, but from protecting what you love." The young dragon's words carried through the plaza and beyond, transmitted by the communication systems to every corner of the colony and to the ships waiting in space above. "I am still Draknari," Ember continued, "but I'm also something new. I am proof that our species can be more than warriors. We can be guardians. We can be friends. We can be family to those who need us." The transformation that followed was not immediate or complete, but it was real. Korak, faced with evidence that challenged everything he had believed about strength and conquest, made a decision that would echo through history. "I request permission to remain here temporarily," he announced to Administrator Park, "to observe and learn from what my youngling has discovered." 2. Other dragons from the fleet requested the same permission. Others returned to their ships but carried with them stories of human children who showed courage without weapons and dragons who protected instead of conquered. In the months that followed, Haven's Rest became the first interspecies colony in human space. The children who had befriended Ember became the first generation of humans to grow up with Draknari guardians, learning lessons about courage, loyalty, and the power of chosen family that they would carry to other worlds and other meetings with alien species. Dr. Rodriguez established the Guardian Protocol, a system for raising young members of alien species alongside human children, fostering understanding and cooperation from the earliest possible age. Her work proved that behavior and culture could be shaped by environment and choice, offering hope for peaceful contact with any species humanity might encounter. Ember, now a magnificent adult dragon but forever changed by its early experiences, became the official ambassador between species. The dragon continued to protect not just the original children of Haven's Rest, but their children as well, and eventually their children's children. Years later, when Lucy Chen brought her own daughter to meet Ember, the dragon's scales brightened to the same warm gold they had shown on that first day when a small hand had touched its claw in trust. "This is Ember," Lucy told her daughter. "Ember is family." The little girl looked up at the great dragon with the same fearless curiosity her mother had shown years before. "Hello, Ember," she said, holding out her hand. And in that simple gesture, the future of two species continued to unfold, one generation of trust building upon another, creating a legacy that would span the stars. The baby dragon who had learned to love human children had become something greater than anyone had imagined. A bridge between worlds, a guardian of the innocent and proof that family is not determined by blood or species, but by the choice to protect and cherish those who cannot protect themselves. In the end, the greatest victories are not won through conquest, but through the courage to extend your hand in friendship to someone different from yourself, and the wisdom to accept that hand when it is offered in return.